Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. Jake Benson's life has been distinguished by a sequence of predictable patterns, each one following the next like clockwork. He grew up in a tiny town where everyone knew one another, in a blue-collar family that emphasized hard work and loyalty above everything. Jake was deeply influenced by his father, a mechanic, who taught him the subtleties of machinery and the joy of a job well done. By the time Jake reached high school, he could disassemble and rebuild an engine with his eyes closed. While others longed to leave for larger cities, Jake found solace in the constant routines of small-town life. During his undergraduate years, Jake met Emily, a bright, motivated lady who seemed to be his complete opposite. While Jake was sensible and entrenched in his community, Emily was ambitious, constantly looking for the next challenge. They connected over their common desire to create a solid future. Jake pursued a career as a heavy equipment mechanic, while Emily worked in secretarial positions until securing a position at a famous legal company. Their early years together were a combination of joy and suffering, with few funds but enormous goals. They worked hard and saved until they could afford a small home. Jake put his all into making it a home, working long hours and dedicating weekends to maintenance and upgrades. Meanwhile, Emily concentrated on her profession, taking on new tasks at work in the hopes of moving forward. Despite their hectic schedules, they made time to cultivate their love, fantasizing about future holidays and milestones. However, as the years passed, flaws appeared in their supposedly firm foundation. Jake saw that Emily had become increasingly aloof, working longer hours and often traveling out of town. Despite her assurance that it was all for their shared future, Jake couldn't ignore the notion that something was wrong. Their chats were shorter, and their laughing became less frequent. Nonetheless, Jake believed that love was powerful enough to withstand any storm. Jake's devotion to Emily never faltered, even as her conduct got more perplexing. When she accepted a new position at Greenwood and Pierce, she seemed both delighted and nervous. She often talked about her demanding employer, Mark Thompson, with affection and anger. Jake attempted to console her, reminding himself that every relationship had ups and downs. He hoped that with time and effort, they might rekindle the intimacy they previously had. Jake Benson entered his house, firmly closing the door behind him and letting his shoes fall to the floor. Earlier that morning, he had transported his wife, Emily, to the airport for a work trip to the state capital, which would keep her busy all day. Her position as a legal secretary often forced her to do errands for her employer, Mark Thompson. Despite Emily's repeated warnings that Kane loathed him, Jake continued to address him as Mark with willful indifference. Jake struggled to warm up to the guy, whose highly polished manner always struck him as dishonest. The clock read 7:20 a.m., still early enough for Jake to have another cup of coffee before going out to do errands. He could even take a time to check his email or surf the internet. Though he wasn't a huge lover of technology, Jake loved staying in contact with a few old trade school classmates who had relocated for job, while he stayed in town working as a mechanic for a heavy equipment firm. Jake was in his mid-30s and was one of 3 senior technicians in charge of a 5-person crew. He remained hands-on with the job, particularly when it came to the more intricate fuel systems. The work had its ups and downs, including hard hours and travel, but it was doable. Emily, on the other hand, had worked at Greenwood and Pierce for 6 months, transferring to a higher-paying job as a legal secretary. They had met in college, begun their professions, and purchased a home together within a few years. They were proud of what they'd accomplished. After completing his coffee, Jake walked into the spare room to check the computer. He hoped Emily had left it on, saving him the time spent waiting for it to boot up. The computer saver flicked on, displaying a snapshot from their vacation in Willow Creek, showing both of them sitting on the beach, tanned and happy, with the blue Caribbean Sea extending behind them. Emily insisted on using this photograph rather than one from their resort's beach since she was concerned her parents might see the other one. He clicked to turn off the screensaver, and an email from Emily's work account appeared in his inbox. It was unusual. Emily was generally cautious about combining professional and personal correspondence. But before he could think anything about it, his gaze landed on the subject line underwear. His interest was piqued. He reached ahead and grabbed the modem, recognizing it had malfunctioned again. Before he could reset it, he scanned the message. Emily, I hope I catch you before you leave. Can you bring that black bra with the teal accents we got last time? You never had a chance to wear it for me. My meeting with the governor isn't until 2, so we might have time. I took them off for you this morning. Mark. Jake stopped, his heart sinking. The email confirmed his worst suspicions. Emily and Mark Thompson were having an affair. He peered at the screen, unable to comprehend it. He recalled seeing the same black bra with teal embellishments while Emily packed that morning, and it was suddenly missing from her drawer. Jake tried to convince himself that it was simply a coincidence. He sat down hard on the bed, recalling their last chat. Emily said the bra was for him, although they had never worn it. He waited a few minutes before attempting to wipe the notion from his head. Emily had always been caring and devoted, surely there was another reason. He merely needed to find out what had missed. Returning to the computer, he pressed the browser's pause button to reset the screen, hoping Emily hadn't logged out. He reset the modem, then waited for it to reconnect. After that, he checked her email. The majority of the letters were legal, but then he saw a folder titled Personal. His heart accelerated as he clicked on it, revealing many emails, half of which were from Mark. Jake opened the first one and read it twice before his face became pale. His hands tightened into fists and he printed it before checking the time. He was already running late for work and he couldn't concentrate now. He phoned Anil, grabbed his phone, and spent the next hour reading and printing out further emails which he sent to his personal account. When he finished, tears welled up in his eyes. He realized his marriage was ended. After reviewing the emails, Jake established a folder in his personal account to contain the forwarded messages, changed his password, and shut down his computer. He brought the printed papers and his half-drunk coffee into the kitchen, where he opened a beer and reviewed the emails. The specifics were gut-wrenching. Emily had been having covert encounters with Mark, and the affair seemed to have started shortly after she began her new work. She had been lying to him for months about her supposed work excursions, which were really secret meetings. One email described how Mark had gifted Emily an expensive pocket book, which she dismissed as a poor counterfeit. Jake's got twisted. The affair was not only genuine, but it had been going on for quite some time. The emails were full of facades, secret encounters, and expensive presents. Emily had even seen Mark while claiming to be at work. By lunchtime, Jake had left aside the emails, preoccupied on what to do when Emily returned. She would return tomorrow morning and generally checked in with him during the day. The remainder of the day went in a haze as he drank beer and replayed memories of their time together, overcome by feelings of betrayal and impotence. Jake had drank enough by 6:00 p.m. to be physically and psychologically numb. After swallowing his last beer, he flopped on the bed, totally dressed, and promptly fell asleep. He was startled awake at 10:15 p.m. by the sound of the telephone ringing. He took up the phone, groggy and bewildered, and assumed Emily was calling from the Hilton. "Hello," Jake said, his voice husky with sleep. "Is that you, Emily?" A voice on the other end said, "No, it's me." Jake rubs his eyes. "Sorry, I must have dozed off." "You've never done that before." "What's going on?" The voice inquired, sounding worried. "I had a few beers after work. Guess they knocked me out," Jake responded frankly. "How was your day? Was Mark making things difficult?" Jake halted in astonishment at her query. "Why do you ask? You don't usually ask about my work." "Oh, no reason," she said hastily and defensively. "How are you doing? You okay?" Jake's voice became sour, his remarks dripping with disdain. "Yeah, I'm fine. Totally trust you, Emily. I know I can always count on you." There was an unsettling pause on the other end. "Of course you do," she said, embarrassed. "But why would you say that?" "Forget it," Jake said, his tone cold and impersonal. "I'm going to bed. The beer's got me wiped out." "Okay, get some rest." "I love you," she whispered quietly. Jake couldn't say anything back. "Yeah, okay. Bye." He hung up, his head still filled with bewilderment and pain. He limped to the restroom, hoping to ease the ache with each step. Jake awoke a few hours later, significantly less inebriated but still unsure of his feelings. He wasn't prepared to face the day, but he wasn't going to sit there either. He waited by the phone for a bit before dialing the Hilton's room 612. It rang repeatedly. No response. After nearly a dozen rings, he hung up, his aggravation building, but he didn't care enough to let it bother him any longer. The game they were playing made them angry, but it also made them cry. He laid over and attempted to sleep again, but his head was too cloudy to think clearly. Jake felt no shame the following day over his drinking. After a brief shower, he went through the motions at work, but his mind kept returning to Emily. By the end of the day, he was too preoccupied with concerns about her treachery to concentrate on his job. On his way home, he stopped at a fast food restaurant but just ate a few bites before drinking 2 more beers. He promised himself he wouldn't purchase another 6-pack, despite the great temptation. At 8 p.m., he attempted to phone the Hilton again. There was no response after 10 rings. He phoned every half hour, and at 9:35, Emily had picked up after just 2 rings. "Hey, Jake, just in time," she remarked, sounding too casual. "I was about to go to bed but stayed up to wait for your call. I didn't sleep, just watched TV and waited." Jake said plainly, "How was your night?" "Same as yours," she said calmly. "Just lying here watching TV. Took a long bath, though." Jake masked his fury behind his voice. "You should get some rest." "Well, figure things out when you get back." They exchanged a few more words, but neither spoke anything. Jake finally stated, "I have to go. I'll see you tomorrow." "Love you," Emily replied quietly. Jake couldn't muster an answer. "Yeah, okay. Bye." He hung up, his head still filled with bewilderment and pain. He waited another 15 minutes before phoning again. Once again, there was no response. The following day, Jake left work early, feeling a peculiar sense of closure. He wasn't sure what would happen when Emily returned, but he knew they wouldn't be living together for much longer. He arrived home at 1 p.m., bracing himself for the showdown he knew was on its way. As he sat there, he reflected on their history and the life they had made together. He tried to remember the pleasant times, but it seemed impossible when he heard her bringing baggage through the door. It struck him, this was the end. Emily entered the kitchen, astonished to see him. "Jake, why aren't you at work?" "I've been waiting for you," Jake said, his tone harsher than intended. "Why?" she inquired, perplexed. Jake didn't respond. Instead, he snatched a stack of papers off the table and slapped them down in front of her. As she flicked over the pages, her face became pale. She threw them back down without saying anything. "Where did you get this?" she eventually said, her voice barely above a whisper. "From my work email," Jake said softly. "That's all I needed to find out." Emily nodded slowly. "The modem broke and my email stayed up. I didn't even realize it." "Yeah, well, if it hadn't been for that, I never would have known," Jake said, his voice shaking. Emily did not say anything. Instead, she took out her phone and made a brief call. "Jake knows. I don't care how he found out, he'll take a cab, meet you there. Bye." She turned to Jake, her gaze avoiding his. "I'm leaving. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'll come back for my things tomorrow." Jake stood in startled silence. "That's it? No explanation? You're sorry because I found out?" Emily came to a halt, her back to him, and collected her belongings. "What's there to explain? I've been with Mark for 6 months now. It's just normal for us. Has been so good to me. You just can't compete with that." Jake's temper surged. "Good for you. What about the gifts? The purse, the earrings?" Emily paused, her expression darkening. "Gifts are part of it. Mark does everything big. I'm ready for that life." Jake shook his head, his thoughts whirling. This isn't the Emily I knew. Emily headed towards the entrance, carrying a garment bag with her. Jake followed her quietly, watching her go outside and into a taxi. She piled her belongings into the vehicle with robotic precision, giving him one more look before the taxi drove away. Jake stood at the doorway, his pulse hammering, trying to process what had just transpired. What just happened? He said to himself. But there was no response. He sat back down at the table, attempting to put together the chaos of his feelings. The finality of it all made him numb. The following day, Jake was still reeling from Emily's abrupt departure. She phoned about midday and said she was coming to pick up the remainder of her belongings. When she arrived, her father, Peter, assisted her with loading boxes into their vehicle as they packed. Jake sat in his living room, lost in meditation. Peter joined him, and after a lengthy quiet, Jake said, "Did she tell you what's going on?" Peter, feeling ashamed, responded, "I don't understand it either, Jake. We don't know why she's leaving you for her boss. He must be something special." Jake shrugged. "I guess it's what he can give her. It doesn't make sense." Peter inquired, "Does it matter?" "No," Jake said. "She's been with him for months now. I can't forgive that." Emily took out a box and informed him coldly, "I have everything I want, do whatever you want with the rest." With tears in her eyes, she raced away with her father. They returned multiple times for the remainder of her belongings. Jake investigated the bedroom after they had departed. He discovered a handful of her stuff left in the closet, including bras he had purchased for her. He flung them back in disdain and piled her clothing into rubbish bags, intending to discard them. Her toiletries and cosmetics were thrown away. An hour later, the bedroom was almost empty. Jake laid on their bed, enraged and plotting retribution, but he soon realized he wasn't a violent guy. He concentrated on forgetting her. The weekend was a blur. Jake drank more to ease his anguish, asking himself, why did she do this? But attempting to suppress the thoughts. By Monday, he felt marginally better, but he couldn't explain why. Jake seemed distant at work. But on Tuesday, he contacted Greenwood and Pierce to get Emily's forwarding address. Emily had sent an email with Mark's apartment address, which the receptionist responded with. Jake was summoned into his office on Wednesday to discuss a mortgage payment. Following a heated debate, he realized that approximately $20,000 had been withdrawn from his and Emily's accounts. Furious, he went directly to the legal office and demanded his share of the money. He stormed into the office, exclaiming, "What the hell are you doing, embezzling from our accounts? I want my money back now." Mark appeared immediately, closing and locking his office door behind him. Jake turned back to Emily, who was attempting to flee. "Where's my money?" he shouted. Emily eventually came forward, her voice shaky. "Take the house, the car, the furniture. Here's everything," she added, giving him an envelope. As Jake unlocked it, 2 security officers appeared and told him to leave. He responded, "You've turned into a money-hungry witch. I don't recognize you anymore." Before leaving, he screamed at the closed office door, "Stay in your office, Mark. You coward." He heard several of Emily's co-workers laughing at the lawyer's response. When Jake opened the letter, he found Emily had shared all of their financial information with Mark. The spreadsheet indicated that if she accepted the cash, he would get the home, vehicle, and furnishings, while everything else would be divided evenly except for their debts. While it seemed fair on paper, Jake understood the property value was overstated and fees were disregarded. He was confident he would never get his $20,000. He placed the documents back into the envelope and headed to his bank to get a line of credit to cover the mortgage and other payments until his next salary. The next 2 weeks were a haze. Jake got a letter the day after visiting the legal office, telling him to avoid Emily and Mark or face harassment charges. He was outraged, but he understood that responding aggressively would only make things worse. Emily filed for divorce a week later, citing the spreadsheet's stipulations. Jake's lawyer advised him that the settlement was unfair, but challenging it would cost more than it was worth. Life gradually got more manageable. 3 weeks after Emily had departed, Jake recognized he still had work to do. Every time he entered the bedroom, recollections of her persisted. Sitting at the cosmetic table and reading in bed, he began by relocating the table to the basement and rearranged the bedroom. In the bathroom, he removed her jewelry and refreshed the environment. When he finished, he felt as if the home was truly his. There were still images of Emily and them together, however. He resolved one evening to get rid of them all. He placed the photos in a box and browsed through their photo albums. After eliminating a few photos of people he still cared about, he placed the first album, which had images of them, in the box. The second book, their wedding album, included solely images of him and his dead parents, which he saved. The third book, which largely included childhood images, had a handful of Emily, which he also placed to the box. The final album, which was filled with photos from his earlier years, included one of him with his high school classmate Hannah Roberts. He momentarily pondered what she was up to now, but brushed it aside. The photo albums were returned on the shelf, with the box of saved images sitting on top to be dealt with later. Though he had erased all outward signs of Emily, memories of her persisted, especially at night. One night, he searched up Hannah's phone number in the phone directory but couldn't find her or her mother. He was satisfied and determined not to worry about her anymore. 6 weeks after Emily departed, Jake was startled by a tap on the door. It was Emily's brother, Ryan Blake. "I didn't expect to see you," Jake remarked, welcoming him inside. "I tried calling, but your phone number is out of service," Ryan said. "I switched to just a cell phone," Jake said, handing him a drink as they sat down. He added, "I came by because of Emily. After she left, I wondered if you'd be around." Jake cast a peek at him. "Emily stopped by to visit Susan the other day. I told her what I thought about her affair. She went to the kitchen to talk to Susan. I couldn't stay. I was too angry." "I know, Jake. But my sister's family," Ryan responded. "Family first," Jake said. Ryan kept going. "I overheard their conversation in the kitchen. Emily was talking to Susan about leaving you for her boss. She said the gifts and lifestyle with Mark were nice, but you outclassed him by a mile in the bedroom. She said she would have broken up with him soon, maybe next week, if you hadn't caught her." Jake shakes his head. "Doesn't matter now." Ryan halted. "She regrets it, but she's still pushing ahead with the divorce." "Of course," Jake mumbled. "I got the new papers today. Looks like Mark has a judge in his pocket." Ryan went on. "I overheard them talking about you being a starter husband. Sounds like they've discussed it before. Emily thought Mark would be a step up for her." Jake breathed hard. "So I'm her starter husband, great." Ryan moved uneasily. "I'm mad at Susan too. Sounds like she might be thought the same thing. I'll talk to her about it when I can keep my temper in check." After another half hour of talk, Ryan departed, leaving Jake to mull over the starter husband statement. He eventually fell asleep hours later, still reflecting about the discussion. The next day, after work, Jake stopped at a huge grocery shop on his way home, believing it was time to eat healthily instead of depending on fast food. As he put his stuff on the checkout counter, the clerk welcomed him. "Aren't you Jake Benson?" she inquired. Jake glanced up and recognized her as a former classmate. "Hi, Megan. Didn't know you worked here. It's been a while." They talked as she rung up his items. After paying, Jake said, "You were close to Hannah Roberts. Have you heard from her or her mother?" Megan pondered for a minute. "I heard Hannah got married years ago. Her mom still lives in the same house, though she remarried a few years ago." Jake said, "Do you know her new last name?" Megan paused before replying, "It's Smith. Maybe Smitherman or Smithsonian." They agreed to meet up over coffee and bid their goodbyes. Jake left the shop feeling better, thankful for the temporary break from his soon-to-be ex-wife. Jake made a nutritious supper at home before going for his first exercise in weeks. He determined that this would be his new routine: eat well, exercise regularly, and take care of himself. Later, he sought for Hannah's mother's phone number in the phone directory and found it under Smithers. He called the phone, and Linda Smithers answered. "Hi, I was hoping to get Hannah's address. I thought I'd write to her," Jake told me. Linda gave an answer. "Her name's Hannah Jansen now. You can call her, no need to write." She handed him Hannah's phone number and added, "She's a widow now." They hastily said their goodbyes and Jake dialed the number. He was astonished to learn Hannah lived in a low-income area. He planned to contact her shortly. Jake embraced his new lifestyle over the following 4 days, and he felt better physically and psychologically. He started to believe that life after Emily may be conceivable. But then a brief letter from Emily came, stating merely, "I never thought of you as a starter husband." Jake believed Ryan had informed Susan what he'd overheard, who then told Emily. The letter brought all of his pain gushing back. After a few seconds of thought, Jake said, "Actions speak louder than words," but Emily did not react. Jake got his final divorce papers 3 months after Emily had gone. He was amazed by how fast they had been processed, most likely due to Mark's influence. After his normal run, Jake drank a cool beer to commemorate his recent divorce. He then texted Emily, "You got what you wanted." She didn't respond. That evening, after examining the divorce paperwork, Jake decided to phone Hannah. He had pushed it off, but now that he was legally divorced, he felt ready. He called her number and she answered. "I'm glad to hear from you," Hannah remarked. "I tried to reach you, but your number didn't work." "I switched to a cell phone," Jake said. Hannah revealed that when they lost contact, she married Frank Jansen, who was murdered in Iraq while in service. As a widow with a small daughter, she was surviving on a survivor's annuity and expected to return to work as a therapist once her daughter began school. Jake discussed his divorce, and as their chat drew to an end, he said, "How about getting together for dinner or drinks sometime?" Hannah paused. "I'm sorry, Jake, but I'm not ready for that. I'm focused on my daughter right now. Maybe another time." Jake was upset, expecting they might reunite after so many years. "It's okay." "Good luck, Hannah," he murmured, cutting the phone short and feeling sad. He had another drink and went to bed. It had been an emotionally draining day. The next 2 months passed by. Jake relaxed into his routine, aware that he would ultimately have to decide what to do with his life. He didn't want to start a new relationship just yet, preferring to wait till Emily was out of his thoughts. Though he still had thoughts about her, they were becoming less frequent and less unpleasant. Jake had discontinued newspaper delivery months ago to save money, so he now depended on newspapers left in the lunchroom at work and the odd radio broadcast. He went to work one morning in his detached condition. During his coffee break, a coworker threw a newspaper in front of him with the headline, "One dead, one in serious condition." The story described a deadly accident involving Mark Kane, who lost control of his automobile and crashed into a ditch, ejecting and killing him. Emily, the passenger, was badly hurt and required medical care. Police assumed Mark was inebriated at the time of the collision. Jake reread the article twice. He put the paper away and added, "Can't say I'm sorry has dead. I hope Emily pulls through, but that's all. I've moved on." The colleague looked at him and said, "You sure about that?" Jake nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure. That article proves it. I don't feel anything beyond basic sympathy for her." Jake's life changed after that moment. He realized he wasn't emotionally trapped anymore. While he felt for Emily, he had let go and was ready to go on. In the days that followed, local press reported that Mark had been drinking when he collapsed. Emily remains unconscious and in serious condition. How did Jake respond? He invited a secretary to supper and enjoyed the evening without reflecting on the past. It felt fantastic to connect with someone again, and it signaled his complete recovery from his rut. About 2 weeks later, Jake was astonished by Ryan Blake's late-night visit. They sat down in the kitchen, drink in hand. Jake inquired, "What's up? Been a while. I was in the neighborhood and heard about Emily's accident. How's she doing?" Ryan inquired. Jake was surprised to find Emily's health was worse than the press had stated. She had sustained a severe head injury and was in a medically induced coma. Ryan said that she had undergone severe brain surgery and that they would have to wait to see whether she woke up after the swelling was reduced. Jake expressed astonishment and wished Ryan's parents well. "I didn't realize it was that bad. Let them know I'm thinking of them." He responded, "Actually, they were wondering why you didn't visit her in the hospital. I told them you moved on." Jake grinned. "Yeah, I'm over it. I've even started dating again. It feels good. A year ago, I'd have been a wreck, but now I've moved on." Before departing, Ryan revealed some personal news. "Susan and I worked things out. I guess the grass isn't always greener. Emily's accident made her realize she wanted to be with me." Jake was relieved for Ryan. "Good to hear. It's great that Susan saw things clearly. Could have been worse, we could have had kids." After Ryan departed, Jake continued to date casually. He went out once a week, sometimes with Jean, a colleague, and stayed a few nights at her house. Their connection was faint, but it helped Jake restore his confidence. One Thursday evening, after his customary run, Jake was startled by a tap at the door. It was his ex-father-in-law, Peter. "Come in, Peter. What's going on?" Jake inquired. Peter, seeming harried, said, "In going to the hospital, Emily just got there this week, and we were hoping you could meet us tomorrow at 2:00. Jake was perplexed. Why me? It's been a long time since our marriage ended. Peter exhaled with relief. We just want you to come. We'll talk when you're there. I have to go now. See you tomorrow. Jake rescheduled his schedule and went to the hospital the following day, excited to meet Emily but puzzled why Peter wanted him there. He came early and went up to her room, wanting to get things done swiftly. Jake came off the elevator on Emily's level at 2:20. He had the room number and saw it was just across from the nurse's station. As he neared her room, he experienced an unexpected surge of anxiety. He hadn't seen Emily since their unpleasant confrontation at her workplace, and they hadn't even exchanged emails in months. He took a big breath and entered her room, pausing when he spotted her. Emily was sleeping. Her shoulder-length blonde hair was chopped short, most likely owing to surgery. A prominent scar on the right side of her skull was still healing, and an IV was inserted into her right arm. The monitoring device indicated her vital indicators. Jake was pleased to find her looked as gorgeous as ever, with no obvious injuries from the accident other than the scar. He pondered grasping her hand for a minute, but then recalled the writings he discovered long ago, causing his jaw to stiffen. He chose to wait for her parents. After a few moments, Emily's eyes slowly opened, and she smiled brightly when she saw him. Jake, you're here. Where have you been? I've missed you so much. Jake was surprised by her response. I've been home and at work, he said. Emily looked perplexed. Why weren't you here when I woke up? Why weren't you with me? Jake's perplexity grew, and his fury blazed. Why should I be here? We're divorced. You left me for someone else. I'm only here because your parents asked me to come. Emily's reaction stunned him. She quickly grew upset, attempting to release herself from the device. In a panic, she took out her IV, setting off sirens on the equipment. Two nurses raced in, with one shouting, "What did you do to her?" I didn't do anything, Jake said, stepping away. The second nurse proceeded to get shackles and doctor's consent to sedate Emily. Jake, feeling entirely out of place, exited the room and walked to the elevator, mumbling, "I think she's crazy." Emily's parents came just as he was getting into the elevator. Before they could say anything, cries rang out from Emily's chamber. A nurse hurried in with a syringe, and Emily's mother, shocked, questioned Jake, "What did you say to her?" I just talked to her, Jake said. Good God, no. Her mother said, racing past him. Jake, puzzled, hit the elevator button. As the doors closed, he saw Emily's father leave the room to seek for him. Jake threw a short wave before the door closed. He was eager to begin his weekend early. On the way home, he attempted to make sense of what had just transpired but ultimately opted to ignore it. Emily's reply made it evident that she had psychological difficulties as a result of the tragedy, which he was not interested in dealing with. Let her parents and physicians handle it, he reasoned. Later, he decided to contact Hannah Jansen one more time, hoping she might rethink supper. If not, he would phone Jean from the office about some business. He almost hung up when Hannah answered. Hi, Hannah. It's Jake Benson. I'm so glad you called, she replied. I tried to reach you, but your number didn't work. I switched to a cell phone, Jake said, smiling. Hannah said, I wanted to apologize for being harsh the last time. Jake comforted her, no need to apologize, Hannah. I can handle rejection. She paused before adding, I wanted to ask if you'd like to have dinner tonight. Jake pondered a while before adding, or tomorrow night. Hannah took a moment to speak. Tomorrow's my parents' anniversary, but 2 nights no good either. I couldn't find a sitter for Lucy. Jake grinned. How about we bring Lucy along? I'd love to meet her. Hannah laughed. You've never gone to dinner with a 4-year-old, have you? It limits your choices. Jake said, we can find a place that works for all of us. After some back and forth, Hannah consented. There's a place Lucy likes. It's family-friendly with a great dessert bar. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 5 p.m. Let me know where you're going, Jake responded, excitedly. Hannah seemed apprehensive. Are you sure about this, taking Lucy? Jake laughed. Absolutely. If she's anything like her mom, she'll be great. You've always been so polite and well-mannered. They kept speaking until Hannah had to go. Jake hung up, excited. He hadn't been so eager in a long time, and he prayed the evening would go as planned. Later that night, as he lay in bed, Jake relived his evening with Hannah and Lucy. He grinned, satisfied with how things had gone, and looked forward to Sunday morning. He had agreed to accompany them for church, but he wasn't looking forward to the sermon. He just wanted more time with the two ladies he had spent supper with. When he arrived at Hannah's flat, he saw how different she appeared. Her black hair was suddenly cropped short, and she seemed taller, but he believed this was merely his memory playing tricks. She had filled out all the correct fields, and her grin and eyes remained the same. When he first saw Lucy, he was struck by how much she resembled her mother, down to the black hair and eyes. Hannah joked that Lucy had her father's nose, but Jake believed she resembled Hannah. Lucy was hesitant at first and studied him intently. Jake was concerned that she would disapprove of his interest in her mother, but his worries were alleviated when she cheerfully held his hand as they went to the restaurant. They utilized Hannah's automobile so Lucy wouldn't have to exchange seats while driving. Jake started to like Lucy, particularly when she often interrupted their discourse with "What's empty?" queries, which Hannah was little uncomfortable about. After dinner, Jake and Lucy enjoyed selecting sweets. He encouraged her as she helped make her mother's soft-serve ice cream and picked toppings for her own. Lucy was ecstatic when Jake recommended her choose all 3 toppings. The evening ended awkwardly when Lucy drew her mother away to prepare for bedtime. Jake led them to the door, but any plans for an embrace or kiss were immediately crushed by Lucy's insistence on her nightly ritual. The following day, after church and breakfast at Denny's, Jake observed his ex-in-laws at his front door. Hannah pointed them out, and Jake remarked, "Those are my ex-in-laws. I'll go see what they want." Before he could go, Lucy reminded him, "Don't forget to take me to the zoo." "I won't forget," Jake assured. "I'll meet you after you change." When he contacted his ex-in-laws, Susan spoke first. "We need to talk. It's important." Jake brought them inside for coffee, and once seated, Susan continued, "Emily's in a terrible state. Ever since your visit, she's been sedated constantly, and she becomes hysterical as soon as the medication wears off." Jake was perplexed. "What does this have to do with me?" Susan proceeded, "When we asked you to meet on Friday, we wanted you to meet with her neurologist. He needed to explain her condition." Jake said, "I didn't know, but what difference does it make?" Joseph continued, "She can't expect me to forget just because Mark is dead. It doesn't work like that." She went on, "Emily suffered a severe head injury. Her temporal lobe was damaged, and she's experiencing retrograde amnesia. The doctor explained that she's lost most of her memory from the past year and a half." Jake was astonished. "So she doesn't remember the affair or the divorce?" He clarified, "She doesn't remember much of the recent past. She thinks you two just came back from Willow Creek." Jake was taken aback. "You're saying I should have lied to her?" He replied, "No, but we need to be careful." The doctor suggested not lying but easing her into the truth. Overloading her with details could cause her to form false memories. Susan moved on, "She's fragile. The news you gave her upset her greatly. They are starting her on new medication to help her stabilize." Jake felt guilty. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad it was." Susan softened. "We hope you can help her by triggering some of her lost memories." The doctor suggested showing her photo albums. Pictures could help her reconnect with her past. Jake paused before responding, "I can't help with the albums, they aren't here." Susan was puzzled. "What do you mean they're not here?" "They are gone," Jake said, heading down the corridor. "They were thrown out with the trash months ago," he informed me. There was a prolonged pause. Susan and Joseph sat struck silent. Jake said, "I can explain if you'd like me to print an email for you." Jake returned a few minutes later with a printed paper that he presented to Emily's parents. "A few months ago, Jake told me, I deleted the photos I wanted from our albums and sent Emily this message: I've kept the photos I wanted. The rest are in a box. Let me know where to send them." She replied, "Do whatever you want with them." I kept the photos for a while, but eventually I threw them out with the trash. I'm sorry. Susan and Joseph said again in startled silence. After a lengthy pause, Jake continued, I have a few more things I can give you. Let me go get them. It'll take about 15 minutes. Jake returned with a stack of papers and a CD. I printed out the letters I used to find out about the affair, Jake told me. Maybe reading them will help Emily remember. These letters are explicit, so consider yourselves warned. He gave them the letters, which included legal mail, including a warning from Greenwood and Pierce Law Office. He also handed them a CD named Willow Creek. These photos were on our computer, Jake said. They are all I have left from our time together. Emily and I visited a nudist beach, and most of the photos were taken there. There's one of us dressed on the beach, but the others, she should probably look at those on her own. Susan folded the papers and CDs. I don't think you'll want to talk to Emily about everything that happened between you two. He responded, not right now. If she wants to talk after reading this and realizes what happened, I might consider it. Joseph responded, is there any chance you'd try to start over with her? Jake shakes his head. I spent months getting over her. She chose Mark's money and status over me. I can't risk her doing that again. Even if the head injury changed her, I wouldn't take the chance. Susan and Joseph understood, but appreciated Jake for his willingness to speak with Emily again in the future. Hannah and Lucy came just as they were leaving. Lucy joyfully informed them, we're going to the zoo to see the elephants. After exchanging short welcomes, Susan and Joseph drove away. Jake welcomed Hannah and Lucy inside while he dressed, and they were on their way to the zoo in a matter of minutes. A month later, Jake was joyful than ever. He saw Hannah and Lucy on a regular basis, albeit their connection had not yet become amorous. Lucy still struggled to sleep while Jake was there, which annoyed both of them, but Hannah recommended they get a babysitter for their next date. That night, they went to a movie and then danced, and Hannah's mother agreed to babysit Lucy afterwards. Jake asked Hannah over for coffee or wine. When they arrived to Jake's residence, he recommended wine, which Hannah accepted. After approximately a half hour of dancing and drinking, Jake brought her to the sofa. Jake took out his phone after they had shared some beautiful kisses. What are you doing? Hannah inquired, smiling. I'm starting to like this, Jake replied, placing a finger to her lips. Just give me a minute. I need to talk to your babysitter. Hannah was perplexed and attempted to grab the phone. Jake eventually stopped her, saying, everything's fine, Linda, but I was wondering if Hannah could stay a little longer. After a short pause, Jake said, I like the way you think, Linda. I'll tell her exactly what you said, but I'll take care of the sheets. See you soon. Bye. Jake hung up, chuckling, while Hannah seemed perplexed. What was that? She inquired. Jake smiled. I think I'm going to really like your mom. She and I have always gotten along, but now, well, she and Daniel are at your apartment, and they are doing the same thing we were on the couch. Your mom said you should stay here tonight, and since you didn't bring your pajamas, she hopes there will be stains on the sheets in the morning. She asked me to change them, but I told her I'd take care of it. Hannah looked at him in disbelief. My mom? No way. Jake laughed again. Well, she's enjoying the wine from your closet, and Daniel got her a little tipsy. She said you need to get over Frank and stay here with me. Since you didn't bring your pajamas, she hopes there will be stains on the sheets in the morning, but she asked me to change them. I'll take care of it. Hannah, flushing, looked at him in bewilderment. My mom? No way. Jake grinned and kissed her softly. Don't let me forget to change the sheets in the morning. I'm sure she'll ask when we meet them for breakfast. Breakfast? Hannah inquired, puzzled. Yeah, Jake said. She wants us to meet at Denny's for brunch at 11:00. No need for church this week. She's bringing Lucy, and we've got no excuse to stay up late. Jake laid on the sofa at 2 p.m., reflecting on the fantastic time he'd had with Hannah and Lucy that morning. Linda, Daniel, and Lucy were already at the restaurant when Jake and Hannah arrived. Lucy waved and giggled, delighted to see her mother, while the grown-ups exchanged smiles as they sat down. Jake joked, sorry we're late. I had to do laundry. Hannah flushed and lightly smacked his arm. Throughout the dinner, they continued to joke about blue pills, linens, and alcohol, leaving Lucy perplexed and the adults exchanging amused looks. Jake kissed Hannah and Lucy in the parking lot before hugging Linda as he drove away. He said quietly, "Thank you for your suggestions last night. They really helped us." Linda grinned and whispered back, "I think you two are perfect for each other." Daniel and Linda joined arms as they went to the vehicle, and Jake waved as they drove away, smiling. Jake's phone just rang. He joyfully responded, "Hi," when he thought it was Hannah. But it was Emily's father, Peter McNeil. "Jake," said Peter, "Emily wants to talk to you. She's at our house. She's too nervous to call herself, so we thought we'd ask if you could come over for coffee." Surprised, Jake said, "I can come over now if you want." Peter's voice was grateful. "If you can, we'd appreciate it." Jake responded, "Okay, he'll be right there," before disconnecting the conversation. As Jake entered his ex-mother-in-law's home, he was reminded of better days spent there. Emily wasn't home yet, so Peter and Susan welcomed him into the kitchen. After pouring coffee, Peter remarked, "Susan and I will leave you two alone to talk." They departed, and Emily quickly entered the kitchen. Jake was astounded by how nice she looked. Her hair had grown back, and she was slimmer but seemed uneasy, spinning a handkerchief to relieve the strain. "You're looking better," Jake observed, his tone gentler than normal. "Thanks, Jake," Emily said, her hands trembling. "I really appreciate you coming. I hope it's not an inconvenience." Jake observed that her eyes were welling up. "It's no problem. How's your memory? Are you starting to remember anything?" Emily shakes her head. "I remember a little from the past year and a half. I went to Greenwood and Pierce and the receptionist showed me around. Some things felt familiar, but other things I had to figure out. It was frustrating." "I can imagine," Jake said compassionately. Emily stopped and wiped her tears. "I spent a lot of time talking to Susan. She helped me understand some things I did. I still have a lot of questions, but first I want to tell you how sorry I am for how I treated you." Jake wasn't sure how to answer. "It's okay," didn't seem right after what had gone through. The stillness between them was filled with anxiety. Then she continued, "I only have vague memories of Mark. I've heard second-hand stories, but I don't even remember living with him. I've seen pictures, but I can't believe I was ever with him." Emily wiped her eyes again, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jake sat patiently, awaiting her next inquiry. After a while, she questioned, "There's one thing no one could answer, how did you find out what I was doing? I know it had to do with email, but I don't understand how." Jake took a deep breath before explaining how he discovered the first message, which led to others. As he talked, Emily brought out a stack of letters he had given her parents. "I found the laundry set and how you talked about getting me to call your hotel room," Jake detailed. "I always called at 9:35, and I can prove you weren't in the room before or after my calls." Emily burst into tears again. After a few moments, she continued, "I'm so sorry, Jake. I can't understand how I did that." Jake took a long gulp of coffee. "It's in the past, Emily. I still get upset at times, but I've moved on." The topic switched to her health. She described experiencing occasional seizures and that physicians were testing several drugs. She had resigned from Greenwood and Pierce, and her parents were talking to an attorney about suing the insurance company and Mark's estate over her injuries. After 15 minutes of small conversation, Jake stated, "I need to go." Before he left, Emily begged him, "Do you think we could go on a date? I know I betrayed you, but I'm the same old Emily now. Maybe if we went out, you could fall in love with me again." Jake paused for a bit before responding, "I'm sorry, Emily. There's no old or new Emily for me. There's only the one I loved and lost to Mark. It took me a long time to move on, but I'm happy now." "I know that's not what you want to hear." Emily started weeping silently. As Jake prepared to depart, she said, "Did you find someone else?" He paused before responding, "I think so, Emily. I think so." Emily's voice crackled. "Is it the dark-haired woman with the little girl?" Jake was astonished. "Yes, that's her." "How did you know?" Emily dried her tears and said, "My parents saw her when they were at the house." Still wiping her tears, she said, "You deserve someone who will treat you better than I did." With that, she bolted from the room. Jake departed soon after, unseen by her parents, who remained in the living room. A month later, on a lovely April day, Daniel and Jake utilized a leased truck to relocate Hannah and Lucy to Jake's home. Things were going so well that they were prepared to take the next step. Lucy was thrilled with her new area in the yard, and Jake had built her a playhouse and swing in the garage. The family started going to church every Sunday, however Jake observed Hannah's parents weren't as regular. 4 months later, the pastor announced Jake and Hannah's wedding the following Saturday and invited the congregation. They settled on a simple wedding at the chapel rather than City Hall. Lucy was overjoyed to be her mother's flower girl, and Jake informed her that Frank Jansen would always be her father, but he was also glad to be a father to her. They decided that Lucy would retain her father's surname even if the adoption became formal. They spent an hour on the phone with Frank's parents, explaining the wedding and their desire to retain Lucy in the Jansen family's life. Friends and relatives were present for the wedding, which went off without a hitch. Hannah was clearly pregnant, and Lucy proudly revealed that she was expecting twin brothers. She appeared as enthusiastic about Jake being her father as she did about the twins' birth. A week later, while working on his vehicle before heading to meet the Jansens, Jake bumped into Ryan Blake, his former brother-in-law. Jake learnt that Ryan and Susan had attended Emily's wedding, but they had departed early because Emily found it difficult to remain. Jake couldn't understand why Emily would attend his wedding. "Why would she want to be there?" he inquired. "She was upset when I told her about my affair with Hannah. Watching us get married must have been tough for her." Ryan said she thought it would help her move on. "It was hard, but she said she was glad she went." He also noted that Emily had resolved her claim against Mark's insurance company for about $2 million. The settlement included Mark's flat, where Emily was now residing. Jake was doubtful. "She said living there would help her regain lost memories, but I doubt it. The doctors think she's recovered as much as she will. Constant reminders of Mark probably won't help her." 2 years have passed rapidly. Jake and Hannah have 2 boys, Frank Jr. and Kevin Jr., and 1 daughter, Marianne, who was named after Hannah's mother. With their increasing family, their home began to seem tight, and they debated whether to relocate or expand. They hadn't made a decision yet, supposing they had another year before it became important. Hannah answered the phone one peaceful Friday evening and invited Jake to join her. He was astonished to hear Peter McNeil on the other end. "I had to call you, Jake, so you wouldn't find out from the paper tomorrow," Peter said him. "Emily's dead. Ryan found her today. She passed away sometime yesterday." Jake was surprised by the news and briefly lost his composure. Hannah, knowing something was awry, grabbed his hand and returned him to the present. He gave her a grin and added, "I'm sorry to hear that, Peter. Please extend my condolences to you, Susan, and Ryan." "Do you know what happened?" Peter hesitated before responding, "I'm afraid she took her own life. She left a note for my mother and me. It was mostly personal, but she wanted you to know that she never stopped loving you. She tried to move on, but she couldn't forget you. She also struggled with ongoing health problems, both physical and mental." Jake's expression relaxed. "I didn't know she was dealing with so much. I haven't spoken to her since that day I visited." "I'm very sorry this happened," Peter said. "If there's anything I can do for you or Susan, please let me know." After a few more remarks, the discussion was over. A few days later, Jake and Hannah attended Emily's funeral ceremony, where they expressed their condolences to her family and friends. Only Greenwood and Pierce's receptionists attended. A few months later, Jake discovered that he had inherited $500,000 from Emily's inheritance. The most of it had gone to her parents and brother. Jake and Hannah pondered whether to retain the money, afraid that it might evoke memories of Emily. In the end, they opted to preserve it and establish trust funds for their children's education, with the remaining used to purchase a bigger house. Though they often recalled Emily and her kindness, it no longer bothered them. Years passed, and Jake found himself reflecting on his adventure with a peaceful feeling of thankfulness. His life had been a tapestry of grief, redemption, betrayal, and regeneration. The agony from his past with Emily faded with time, becoming a bittersweet recollection that no longer weighted him down. Jake and Hannah created a warm, caring household and instilled in their children the qualities of resilience and compassion. Lucy developed into a clever, confident young lady, while the twins kept the home running with their limitless energy and mischief. Their families' laughing filled the whole house, a monument to the power they had found together. Jake frequently thought about Emily in the peaceful nights, not with wrath or grief, but with understanding. Her trials had taught him the value of forgiveness and the need to go on. Her last present, albeit unexpected, provided as a sad reminder of the relationship they previously had. Jake was in his lawn one evening, watching his children play while the sun was setting. Hannah joined him and rested her head on his shoulder. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said quietly. Jake grinned, the warmth of her presence calming him. "Yes, we have. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." As the sun fell below the horizon, Jake realized that life, in all its chaos and beauty, had given him another opportunity. And this time, he wasn't giving up. Thank you for watching. Do you believe Jake should have given Emily a second chance? Please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for future tales. See you next time.